We're talking the Amalgam Kids today, or Plumber's Kids, or Plumber's Helpers, or the Ben 10 Hit Squad, whatever you'd prefer to call them. I suppose their name comes down to what point of the series we're talking about. As the series goes, we have the Plumber's Kids. I suppose you could toss around team names like Alien Force in there as well, who then go on to become the Plumber's Helpers, who then turn out, for the most part at least, to be former members of the Amalgam Kids who reform, presumably going by the same team name. What I'm getting at here is we're talking about the Amalgam Kids, the team of human-alien hybrids first introduced by a different name right at the beginning of Ben 10 Alien Force. So getting into this, I'll cover things in somewhat order, starting with how Alien Force handled them, then we'll go over each member individually with bits and pieces scattered throughout, then the change and retcon come Omniverse with some further explanation. Ending with trying to wrap up a few loose ends and I don't know if you want to call them mysteries, and work out answers to questions that the series never answered. But before we do that, a bit of admin quickly. I'll be using the terms Osmosian and mutants pretty interchangeably when talking about Omniverse, but for now we'll go off the assumption an Osmosian is an alien species, just for our Alien Force section of the video. Right from the beginning of Alien Force, following the disappearance of Grandpa Max, Ben makes the call to follow Bax's parting message, that being to assemble a team to aid Ben in taking on the hybrid invasion of Earth. If this isn't ringing a bell to you and you're not familiar with Alien Force, it's a great story arc, but not all too relevant to what we're talking about today, other than initial character motivations. This team existing of the core group of Ben, Gwen and Kevin, we'll really delve into his involvement a bit later on, and the more outer group being made up of Alan Albright, Helen Wheels, Manny Armstrong and Pierce. There's also a failed candidate in there, Michael Morningstar, who Ben and the others initially sought out as one of however many Plumber's Kids who were out there, only for Michael to end up being an all-round terrible guy, an energy vampire, who'd go on to become a recurring villain and occasional tenuous ally. On that, all these characters, including Kevin, were considered Plumber's Kids, being human-alien hybrids as a result of plumbers intermingling with alien species and having kids of them here on Earth. At least that's our explanation for now. This being the broad term for characters who have some alien background, even if they aren't necessarily kids of plumbers, they might have grandparents who are plumbers or just grandparents who are aliens, like with Gwen, Ben and Cooper. I suppose the same goes for lesser involved characters like Gwen's brother Ken, or maybe their cousin Lucy, but they're not involved all too much in all of this, particularly Lucy, but I suppose she's not a human hybrid so much as she is just a full and open who can appear human. These hybrids, eventually after some run-ins with our main trio that we'll touch on later, end up becoming members of the Plumber's Helpers, working under Max Tennyson, who, surprise, was alive hidden away in the Null Void. Actually, now might be an appropriate time to get into each character individually before we get into Omniverse. As far as Alien Force is concerned, Helen is a half-human, half-Kinesilarant accelerate species, who came into the series alongside her partner Manny, a half-human, half-Tetramand, forearm species. These two making their first appearance following some misuse of a Null Void projector that resulted in Helen's adopted brother Pierce, a half-human, half-unnamed alien species, even though it's almost certainly the same as Argent species. Anyway, Pierce ends up being sucked into the Null Void projector, with Manny and Helen believing the projector was a disintegrator, believing they'd killed Pierce. From there, the pair of them go on to track down and capture as many aliens as they can to, in their minds, disintegrate. That, and while they are doing it to aliens like D and Aliens, who are the villains, they're also doing it to innocent aliens that just so happen to be around the place. Could you imagine if this had happened in Omniverse and they were just running through Undertown doing this to whoever? This leading to Manny and Helen to bump into our main cast of Ben, Kevin and Gwen, who set their heads straight, this resulting in the pair of them heading into the Null Void to help all the innocent aliens they'd captured, along with looking for Pierce. On that, Pierce is sort of the Ben equivalent of the group, with Manny and Helen mirroring Kevin and Gwen, respectively. Pierce, who I was so certain upon my first viewing of Alien Force, was a retconned version of Porcupine from the classic series. But enough of that. After being trapped in the Null Void, Pierce joined up with Max, working together to protect everyone in the Null Void from Dr. Animo, now going by the name Devoid. Pierce is then much later in series found by the Forever Knights during the Purge, where they kill him, leaving Helen and Manny as well as the others to mourn him a second time. Before we move on to Omniverse, on a lighter note but maybe not so light, prior to Pierce's death during the Ultimate Kevin arc, Kevin goes around the place absorbing all the abilities out of each one of the Plumber's Helpers, fully draining them of all their powers, presumably leaving them in their human forms, which doesn't make so much sense but ends up making a lot more sense with the later reveal come Omniverse. And speaking of and getting into my personal favourite of the Plumber's Helpers, there's Alan, the half-human, half-Pyronite or Heat Blast species, who for whatever reason, and I will get into it at the end of the video, unlike the other alien hybrids, can swap between his human and Pyronite form at will. We're introduced to Alan early into Alien Force's run, where he's been thrown under the bus by the local authorities for a series of local arson cases. Not all that relevant to the video, but the arson turns out to be a circuit board being built by the DN aliens. As occasional as Alan's appearances are, they're always pretty good. We'll get into a proper episode recommendation in a moment, but for a single scene with Alan, I really love his fight against Ultimate Kevin. And while we're on series highlights, one of my absolute favourite moments in the series, irrespective of the Plumber's Helpers, but they just so happen to be a major part of it, is the episode Above and Beyond, where in order to test if they're ready to start training at the Plumbers Academy, Max stages a scenario where Ben's lost it, and the team have to fight against a seemingly now evil or corrupt Ben. More of a pseudo-member of the Plumbers Helpers, who's much more involved come Omniverse, we've got Kevin 11, who I've talked about at length in my Many Mutant Forms of Kevin 11 video, so for now I'll just touch on what's relevant. In Alien Force, Kevin's also revealed to be the son of a plumber, his dad being an Osmosian who passed down the energy absorption ability Kevin's so well known for. That and the reveal that Kevin's dad, Devon, was Max's former partner, who died saving Max from the villain Ragnarok. For anyone unfamiliar with what happens come Omniverse, what I want you to remember is that Kevin has the ability to absorb energy in all forms, including DNA, like we see in every iteration of the series, right from his introduction. And finally, we get into Omniverse. Here's where we get the transition from the Plumbers Kids, Helpers, Alien Force, or whatever, to the Amalgam Kids. Turns out none of these characters were born alien hybrids. They're all the result of villain Cervantes creating an offshoot of the Rooters using Kevin's Osmosian abilities to fuse ordinary human children with the DNA of whatever aliens the Rooters got a hold of that they thought were reasonably useful abilities. On that, the reveal is, and major retcon to the series, Osmosians as a species were made up by Cervantes, and the term Osmosian just means a mutant, just like all the mutants we see in classic series, including Kevin. If you're worried about Agrigor or any of the past events in Ultimate Alien, I'll touch on all that at the end of the video. Back to the Amalgam Kids. This group being formed in order to capture an 11-year-old Ben Tennyson, which resulted in the, in case there weren't enough names of this group, Ben 10 Hit Squad, which gave us this phenomenal spooky Amalgam Kevin, being a hybrid of all of Ben's aliens following the original Tenon classic, going on a rampage and costing them the mission. I say that, they probably wouldn't have succeeded either way. Following their failure, Cervantes wiped their memories and left them to wander aimlessly in the null void. On top of that, Cervantes also created false memories that he'd implanted Max of Devon in order to make him look after Kevin for him. Not all too sure on how exactly each of them made it out of the null void independently, but I guess they just all managed it. To try and blend the Alien Force and Omniverse continuities a bit, we have to go off the assumption that from the point they found themselves in the null void without memories, they wouldn't have worked as a team in order to escape, seeing as when Kevin meets any of the Plumbers Helpers in Alien Force, they don't know each other. So somehow each of them escaped from the null void, semi-independently. At least Manny, Helen and Pierce had each other, while Alan had to do it alone. Back to in-series before we talk more loose ends. As far as why they exist as a group, Cervantes felt Ben was too much of a threat to the universe after getting a hold of the Omnitrix, now realizing Ben could transform into a Toku Star, Weybig's people, or Alien X. A reality he gets to see up close in person during the Rooters arc of Omniverse. On Omniverse, to touch on the Rooters arc briefly and the most recent bit we see from the Amalgam Kids, after making his return and controlling their minds, forcibly reforming the group briefly, Cervantes has his control over the group severed after Kevin, now in his Omniverse amalgam, break the device in his head, the Loyalty Neuromatrix, in order to free the others of his control, disbanding the Amalgam Kids proper. Now those loose ends and bits and pieces I've been talking about are not so relevant, but I love their black outfits. They're clearly designed off of what future Kevin 11 wore in the classic series. In series, they do look cohesive as the uniform worn by an offshoot of the Rooters. And while we're on uniforms and a loose end I won't be able to tie off, those helmets they were wearing with the red faceplates when they're after Ben during the Omniverse flashback, I assume that's to hide their identities from Ben, justifying why Alien Force Ben and Gwen never made the connection between them during the attack and meeting them individually later on in Alien Force. But masked or not, surely you'd remember that they were ambushed by what is clearly a child version of Forearms, Heat Blast, Accelerate, and a Porcupine Boy. Especially when you later go on to meet alien hybrids who just so happen to be the exact same. Actually, getting into making what I'm hoping are reasonable conclusions and connecting some dots here, are they really Plumbers Kids? I'm going with, it's very likely they are, since the Rooters being a high-ranking offshoot of the Plumbers, they would probably be able to get info on other Plumbers families, especially if those Plumbers are recently deceased, like we know Manny and Helen's are, and by default I suppose Pierce's parents too, who all have been confirmed to be killed off-screen prior to Alien Force, And following the retcon, I could even see Cervantes being the one responsible for killing their parents. An assumption I'm more confident on before we get into more open-ended questions. Sitting down to work on this video, it occurred to me when Kevin was absorbing a Pyronite's DNA and passing that on to Alan, maybe Alan inherited some of Kevin's ability to shift in and out of his amalgam form. Like we see from Kevin 11,000, being able to go in and out of his future amalgam form. A bit of an elephant in the room for any Ultimate Alien fans watching. What exactly is Agrigor then? In early development of the Rooters arc, there were plans for Agrigor to make a return and be revealed as the result of the Rooters trying to duplicate Kevin's powers, with all of his memories of being an Osmosian, a bit like with Max, being implanted by Cervantes as well. The episode where he would have been introduced would have followed Agrigor's genetic code breaking down, resulting in his eventual death. And the last loose thread I'm going to ask you, and hopefully answer, why is Michael Morningstar not a part of the Amalgam Kids? He ticks all the same boxes, he's a plumber's kid who just didn't end up being good. Why was he not on the Ben 10 hit squad or whatever? My assumption is that he's likely just an actual alien hybrid and a result of regular genetics. That or Cervantes did make him and just didn't care for him, leading Cervantes to exclude Michael from the group. If you made it up to this point of the video and aren't subscribed, please consider doing so. Either way, I appreciate you being here. Thanks for watching.